he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Sit up straight. Stop crying. Don't ever let them see you sweat. Keep a stiff upper lip. Be a man. These are all things that I heard and was taught as a boy growing up. My parents taught me to be independent and not to rely on others for help. They said if I worked hard enough at something, then eventually it would work out right. Because of this, I'm a very self-reliant person and usually hesitant to ask for help. I take on too many tasks. And then, instead of asking for help, I end up worrying and eventually complaining about how I'm going to get things done. Does my story sound familiar to any of you here today? In today's gospel, we find Jesus up on a mountain with his disciples. Large crowds of people are following them because they've seen all the tremendous signs that Jesus had been performing. From his perspective on the mountain, Jesus sees the large crowd coming toward them. Jesus looks over to Philip, recognizing a chance to test his disciple, and asks, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" Now, Philip is a man, of course, so he hears Jesus' question as a call to action. You know, get to work, Philip. Figure this thing out. Instead of answering Jesus' question of where they could buy food for the crowd, Philip explains to Jesus that it would cost more than 200 days' wages to buy enough food for all of them. Philip sees what is lacking. But Jesus did not ask Philip how much it would cost to buy enough food for the crowd. Jesus also did not ask Philip to figure out a way to feed them. Jesus asked Philip, "Where can we buy enough?" Philip immediately recognizes the human problem of finding food for the crowd to eat as a personal challenge. This challenge is heavier on Philip's scale of reality than the presence of Jesus being right there with him. So he explains to Jesus what the problem is. He gives Jesus problems, not solutions. Have any of you ever felt like Philip? Overwhelmed with all the many commitments and obligations in your life? I certainly have. When I'm under pressure, I lose sight of the fact that Jesus is sitting right there next to me. I complain about my lack of means to get things done, but Jesus is there with me. Jesus was right there with Philip as well. Andrew was also there with them, and he found a boy who had 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Well, what good is that going to do with 5,000 people to feed? Jesus had the people recline. Relax. Get ready to eat. Jesus feeds the crowd with no action needed from any of the disciples. And all of the crowd had their fill. Even after the crowd got their fill, there were 12 wicker baskets left over. Jesus provides more than enough. Jesus took what little food that was offered and turned it into more than they could all eat. What would it be like to recline and let Jesus feed us? To not have to be burdened and anxious like Philip. To not have to worry about how much life is going to cost us. Today at this altar, Jesus is telling us to recline and be fed. Jesus takes what little we have to give, blesses it, and feeds us. He gives us his body and blood to eat in the Eucharist. We don't have to worry about what we are lacking because Jesus lacks nothing. We don't have to do it all because Jesus has already done it for us on the cross at Calvary. We can rely on Jesus to help us through whatever it is that we are facing. Jesus gives us his body and blood as food for the journey. So take a breath, relax, lay down your burdens at the foot of this altar, and allow Jesus to satisfy your